Welcome Snakes and Adders. This is the first in the advanced series that we'll be doing on guide videos. This is a reticulated python, a white phase albino. I've always known them as Python reticulatus. Last time they were described as that was by Cluj in 1993. Then some moron called Raymond Hoser decided to rename it to Broghammerus reticulatus. That was in 2003. And then the latest iteration of its Latin name comes from Reynolds in 2014, and it's now known as Malaya Python reticulatus. I still list them as Python reticulatus. Seems like every 5 minutes this thing changes name, so I'll just leave it as what I've always known it as. There were 3 separate subspecies proposed but not currently recognised, and they were Malaya Python reticulatus reticulatus, obviously the nominate form, Malaya Python reticulatus jampianus, obviously referring to the Jampia reticulated python, and then Malaya Python reticulatus saputri. Upon researching this, the bit of research I did for the video, just to make sure I got the information correct, they've got a far wider range than I ever realised. You know, I always thought that they were sort of, you know, mainly certain areas of mainland of Southeast Asia, but Indonesian islands and such. But I'll just run through some of the countries that they've been known to occur. So India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Natuna Islands, Borneo, Sulawesi, Java, Lombok, Sumbawa, Flores and Timor. Now over that range they vary massively in size, anything from 6 feet up to 20 feet plus. Anything 20 foot plus would be considered a rarity, despite what people claim. They're still going to be huge though, you know, average adult size for a female mainland, anything from 16 to 18 feet. The localities that we used to see with a fair amount of regularity prior to the genetics boom, when all of these dwarf localities got fucked up by people doing genetic tomfoolery with them. So you also had Java, Sulawesi, Selayar, Makassar, Jampia, Bali, Madu, Kalatoa and Kayuwadi. Now the last 2 used to be referred to as super dwarfs, the Kalatoa and Kayuwadi. Up at Snakes and Adders Leeds, we bred the Kalatoas back in about 2006. And they pretty much sit on a 50p piece when they were born. The parents were barely 5.5, 6 feet long. Obviously with captive breeding and time these things are going to grow slightly, so maybe now 6, maybe 8 feet, you know, is potentially possible. We've seen other species that have grown over time as well that were supposedly dwarfs and tiny, you know. Unfortunately though, a lot of the morphs on the market are from the mainland, and then they cross these super dwarfs to them to try and get the morphs to be smaller, and therefore lose all of the pure blood from the locality type retics in the process, but I'll get to that in a bit. Another form which was slightly more manageable would be the Madu or Honey Island. That'll do about, I don't know, 10-12 feet. And that's really kind of the dwarfs. You know, it's amazing that I'm even saying the word dwarf with a 3 meter long snake such as a Madu or Honey Island. But you know, those are the strokes you're dealing with the world's longest snake. We oftentimes used to refer to Jampias as dwarfs. I remember having them in the shop back in the day. They were Jampia dwarf retics. But how can we possibly call anything a dwarf that reaches 15 foot long? God only knows. You know, as I've got older, kept more retics, watched what's been happening with the hobby, you know, I look back at some of the things maybe I did, the way I sold stuff, and it probably wasn't the best way of doing things. Balis, yellowheads, again, 15, 16 foot. Occasionally they got to referred to as dwarfs as well. You know, like, they're not dwarfs, they're big friggin' snakes. They're very powerful, very active, and yeah, use the term dwarf lightly. A lot of the super dwarf stuff that you see advertised now, it's just called super dwarf. But what is it? Got to have mainland in it somewhere, you know. I remember when I did the video on Burmese, you know, I was doing a bit of research on the people crossing the mainland Burmese to the dwarf. There's a huge variance in egg size, from 50 grams up to 100 grams in a single litter. So I can only assume that the same sort of variance exists in retics, where the influence from the dwarf is variable, and therefore even something that's supposedly 50% dwarf could still mature to be a very, very impressive size. And therefore, you know, if you were going to buy one, I'd definitely maybe want to see the parents, or at least have the person display some knowledge of what they're selling, and exactly what kind of super dwarf is it, really. They're an egg-laying species. The females are maternal and will wrap round their eggs. They're capable of producing huge litters. You know, I've seen some of the recorded litter sizes approaching 80 eggs. I mean, that's almost unheard of. But off a good sized mature mainland female, 35 to 50 eggs is perfectly doable. You know, I've seen it, you know, I've had some grief and seen that denied, but you know, then I see these videos of people pulling huge clutches of eggs out from females. Oh, look at this beauty, it's cool. And then there's like a mountain of ivory eggs. Yeah, well, there's only one or two there, isn't there? No, it's 40 or 50. The males can become ultra defensive during breeding season, and that's something you've got to be very wary of. There are some bite photographs online which are severe nasty lacerations both to the female snakes and to the human keepers, and these are nearly always inflicted by a male who's in heat. So that's something that you're going to have to watch. Even though the male is the smaller sex, he could actually be more problematic in time, particularly in sexual maturity. So why have I decided to put these in advance? There's more and more people breeding them, more and more people producing them. Well, this is where we have to inject a little bit of common sense. This is a giant snake. It is not for everybody. And despite what people are told about puppy dog tame this, puppy dog tame that, I can do anything with mine, I trust mine with my 8-year-old child, blah blah blah, all the rest of it. If it has a bad day, you're in a world of trouble. And it isn't just retics that I put into advanced. I put Burmese in there, I put Indians in there, I put African rocks in there, I would put the larger amethystines in there, and I would put African rock pythons in there. The truth be told, that the potential for damage, for serious bite wounds, injury, is there if the snake has a bad day. I had a friend called Gary, who kept a big 17-foot female tiger retic, got it out. It's never had a bad day in its life. He's cleaning out the cage, it's on the floor around his feet. Grabbed hold of his foot, hyperextended his ankle, broke all the ligaments in his ankle, a load of the small bones on the top of his foot, ended up having reconstructive surgery. It's no joke. Gary was an experienced keeper with 30 years plus keeping animals, the past 8 years prior to that keeping retics specifically. So the guy knew what he was doing. He cocked up, took a snake for granted, took his eye off the ball, was doing it alone, broke a load of golden rules, and as such messed his ankle up. And yeah, it really put the frighteners on him, as you could well imagine. You know, we've been quite outspoken about retics, the issues facing retics, the way the shop sells retics. We've actually just decided as company policy that once the last of the mainlands we currently have in stock are gone, we're not going to be stocking them anymore, as a simple view to the fact that there's too many being produced. The price of them is deteriorating at a ridiculous rate through overproduction, and people then needing to sell their stock. And then that obviously opens them up, every price drop, to a wider and wider market who have less and less money. Not necessarily less and less experience, but unfortunately if you were producing serious numbers of retics, maybe you do have to play it fast and loose with who you sell them to, because otherwise, you know, within 12 months you'll have something this size. Now if you've just had a litter of 40 eggs, fast forward 12 months, unless you're selling them fairly regularly, you know, even if you said, well, I've had a clutch of 52, that's one a week. And you've got to find suitable keepers capable of maintaining an animal that needs a huge enclosure. The other thing to discuss obviously is retics. They're active, naturally very lean snakes. They're hunters. They're not sit and wait predators. They would be built like a blood python if they were. They'd be built like a death adder a gaboon viper, a viper boa. They are sit and wait sedentary snakes, and you can tell because of their build. This is a lean, active hunting species. What on earth are we doing putting them in rack boxes? Makes zero sense. Be far better to have them in a nice big display viv, some branches and logs, have it climbing, keeping it fit, keeping its muscle tone right. You know, I've seen some videos of some very big breeders pulling snakes out of rack boxes because they're so active. They're pushing on the box edges permanently, massive, great big cysts in their lips, indented foreheads, all sorts of problems. And that's simply because they're being kept in inadequate enclosures. I don't doubt the credentials of the people that are producing them or breeding them. Yes, they made a lot of money. Yes, they've got a successful YouTube channel, etc., etc., etc. But is it right? It's the question you've got to stop and ask yourself. Are we doing the best by our snake by keeping it in a rack box when it is 14 foot long, would enjoy a climb, would enjoy a soak, and obviously looking at it visually, reticulated pythons are one of the single most beautiful species on earth. They are hard to rival. They're absolutely amazing. You know, we have issues with the retics simply because there's just too many of them there. I went to a reptile show in Doncaster in November, and there must have been 300 or 400 retics for sale. This concerns me greatly. Waiting for International Herpetological Society, FBH, to take any action over it would be like trying to plat piss and a total waste of time. So, you know, it's not that we hate retics, we're not hating on retics. I mean, look at it, how could you hate this? It's absolutely phenomenal. But this boy, for example, is an absolute pain in the arse to get out of its tank. It strikes, it lunges, it permanently feels it's being fed, it's triggered, it's on it all the time. Once it's out, you can see it's as soft as a brush. But an inexperienced keeper, of which we get them in weekly in this shop, are scared to death of the idea of a royal biting them, or a carpet python biting them, or a boa, or a king, or a corn, or anything. What the hell are we even considering selling them a retic for? We had a rather glorious troll on our page called Martin. Smile, Lauren. Martin, you're on camera. And his argument was, we're just butthurt because nobody's buying our beginner species anymore and they're going straight onto retics. Another one of his gems was that we were jealous of the money that the retic breeders were making, and you know, all this cash in hand was great and all the rest of it, under the table sales, etc. Now, I'm not saying that all retic breeders are doing it, but what he did inadvertently was make our argument for us. He didn't strengthen the defence of the retic breeders. What he did was undo all their hard work. Long term, I'm sure that their master plan is to get to mega colourful, mega exciting super dwarf retics, which are manageable. And the super dwarfs, Kalatoa, Kayuadi, 6 to 8 feet, would be firmly in the intermediate group, not advanced, and they would be perfectly suitable to a far wider audience of keepers. That is not in denial at all. Mainlands, however, no. Simply no. Let's have a bit of common sense. Jesus. Honestly, like some of the responses we get, it's just retarded. You just think, well, how can you make an argument for an 18-foot snake being a suitable animal for a person with 2 years experience in keeping reptiles and their only previous animal being a corn snake? It makes no sense. The two are apples and oranges, completely incomparable, you know? It's imperative that you do your research when it comes to this species, that you research what the animal is, what locality, where's it's from, how big were the parents, if it's super dwarf, what kind of super dwarf is it? If it's a Madu, fine, because it's a straight locality. If it's Kalatoa, Kayuadi, fine. But when it's a colour-phased super dwarf, all they put is super dwarf. They don't tell us the locality data or anything, and it's important that you find this out prior to purchase so that you know for yourself that you are not inadvertently bought a giant snake, same as all these micro pigs that you see on the market that are only going to reach the size of a Jack Russell, and then suddenly it's an 8 foot long, 80 stone monster. You know, the same thing potentially can happen. Now, there are some great breeders out there with some real skill when it comes to reproducing this species. All I hope is that the skill and obviously the finance that comes with producing large numbers of relatively expensive, for now, pythons, that doesn't take precedence over the fact that you have a responsibility as keepers, breeders and hobbyists to make sure that your animals go to suitable homes with suitable amounts of research with people that are responsible keepers. It's so important. This animal is absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. This is a 10 out of 10 snake for beauty. Absolutely gorgeous. I love retics. Love them with a passion. And it's only because I love them with this passion that I get so pissed off with some of the stuff that goes on. So research Maleo Python reticulatus, or more than likely you'll find them all listed as Python reticulatus. Do as much research as possible. Make sure you're prepared and up to speed. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm trying not to make it as too incendiary because it's a hot topic and a bit of a tinderbox. Just be prepared for what you're taking on. This is a lot of snake and it should be taken seriously. Keep watching the videos. Visit our website at www.snakesnadders.co.uk to see what we're all about. Cheers.